is that they really do seem to listen to the members and the network. And when people are interested, and when the farmer members are interested in having them add something, or they give feedback to the company about what they want to see within the company, they seem to really listen to that and do the best they can with adding products. And it's been interesting to watch them grow as a company and see where they've gone to this point and see where they're going to go in the future. One of the products they've added recently is of course seed, which we're going to hear a lot about today. And I'm going to be learning along with all of you, because I'm going to listen to these three guys talk. These are the masterminds, certainly not me. So we're going to bring them up here and listen to them talk about seed here, because genetics and seed, if you're like me, it really gets confusing to try and understand just exactly how this all works. And so I'm looking forward to listening to these guys talk about how some of that works, and then listening to the data behind that, and listening to these guys talk a lot about the ROI of seed and where we go from here as far as trying to figure out what's best for the ROI and for the bottom line, and not just that top yield number, or trying to do the best with yield. We got to make sure that we do the best financially on our farms too. So I'm going to bring these guys up here, let them do the talking, and we're going to start with Matt Meisner here, and then we're going to move into the other guys here. But thanks for coming, and enjoy.
Cool. Thanks, Zach, for the intro. I think we'll get started. The first part here we're going to talk about is a bit about how we can use data when making seed decisions on the farm. This is a key area that FBN has a lot of products that support. So we'll get started with that. So before we dive into seed specifically, we'll just talk a little bit about what FBN is for those of you who don't know. Many of you are probably members already or familiar with us, but we'll give a brief intro to the network. So FBN started about 6 years ago, and our mission when we started the company is to help farmers be more profitable, help family farms be more efficient. And the fundamental problem that we set out to solve is that today a lot of farms are in a financial position that is often very unfavorable, right? Farms are generally small family farms run by a family and not a big business, doing business with multinational corporations that are heavily consolidated and increasingly so, leading often to a lack of competition for farmers' business. So what we do to solve that is we've built a network of farms, a network that's now over 10,000 farms strong, and we bring farmers together. We aggregate farmers into a network that gives them more market power, better information and data to make decisions and get a better financial position in the market. So if we look at the FBN network today, you can see we're currently active in the US and Canada. Like I said, it's a little bit over 10,000 farms. We just crossed that milestone, I think about a month ago, and growing really, really quickly. So we go to the next slide. Really, like I said, our mission is to help family farms and put family farms in a more financially advantageous position in the market. In order to do that, we feel like transparency through data is really critical. By bringing farmers into one place, we give farmers the financial leverage in the marketplace to get better prices, and with transparency on data, the insights to make decisions that are optimal and the maximization of profit. So if we look at the next slide here, we can see together the now about 38, 37, a little bit over 37 now. The slide is a couple days out of date, and we've been signing up a lot of farms recently. 37 million acres of farms, which puts us roughly the size of Iowa. So look at the next slide. So like I said, data is a key part of what we do at FBN. It always has been. This is one of our favorite definitions of big data, which is obviously joking, but only a little bit joking, right? We hear a lot about data these days, right? There's a lot of hype about data, a lot of companies who say they're using farm data, a lot of bad press about data as well. So we want to explain a little bit about what we do with data and how that can be useful on the farm. So first of all, the first part of big data to us means aggregating a really, really, really complete data set about every farm in the FBN network. So when a farm signs up for FBN, the first thing that we try to do is build a very complete data set on everything that we can possibly get our hands on about that farm. That means data from precision sensors like yield maps and planting maps and spraying maps. It means data on agronomic practices that may not be collected digitally. It means data from weather stations. It means public data from satellites, soil types, elevation, terrain, on and on and on. Literally anything you can imagine, we want to get the data, because that's what's really needed to figure out how these different factors interact with each other to affect your yield. Now, the second part of big data is networking that data together, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but data from one farm, from one field like we just saw, is certainly useful, and there's a lot that you can do with it. However, data from a single farm is always going to be somewhat limited in the amount of inference and information that you can really conclude from that data. So imagine all those layers of data, the soil, planting, application, harvest data, weather, soil, etc., all overlaid with each other and then aggregated from over now a couple 100,000 fields all across North America. Now we have the data set coverage and size and scale that allows us to answer questions that were previously unimaginable to answer with data. So we'll talk about the two key reasons why that's the case, right? When we aggregate data from a network, what are the benefits that we get, right? And how can that actually be applied to making better decisions on the farm? The first point that we'll talk about is this idea that the more data you have, right, the more farms you're aggregating data from, the more confidence that you'll have in the insights and analytics that are derived from that data. So if we look at an example first, not from agriculture, to make this point a little more relatable. So imagine you're buying a product online, right? And naturally you want to buy the product that has high reviews, right? If it's not a brand you care about, if it's a product you don't have experience with, naturally you're going to say, well, let me see what other people have reviewed this as. So if you do that and you find these two products and you see that the first product had a review of 5 stars and the second on the bottom has an average of only 4.5. And if that's all the data you had, right, if you only had those two data points, naturally you would pick the 5-star product because the average is higher, right? Why not pick the best product? Well, if you look at this a little more closely, what you realize is that the 5-star product is only based on one review, right? A single person reviewed this product and they gave it 5 stars, which now I think suddenly makes us much less confident that that's actually true. Whereas the 4.5-star rating is based on data from 500 people. And intuitively, right, if that one person said it's good, maybe they're biased, right? Maybe they work for the company, they were paid to write the review, maybe they just rate everything 5 stars. It's hard to know that we can trust something when only one person has said it. When 500 people have said that this is good, that gives us a lot more comfort in making that decision. So if we look at an agricultural example now, we'll see a similar idea. So if we play the animation here, what we see is how the data set played out over time as we collected more and more data on the yield of a particular corn hybrid. And one of the main data-driven decisions that FBN helps farmers with is making seed selection decisions for your farm, right? We aggregate data from farms, we analyze that and help make recommendations about what seeds would be the best fit for a given set of environmental conditions. So in order to do that, we have to get data and look at how it changes over time. So what we see here is the average yield over time of a given product as we get more and more data. So as we go from left to right, all that's changing is we're getting more and more acres of data. And the green dots are the individual farmer yields, and the black line is the overall FBN average. What stands out in this first graph is how noisy the average is, right? It started off at maybe 180 bushels an acre, was then pulled up by some higher yields that came in next to maybe 220, was then subsequently pulled back down to more around 200 as we got in more data. Basically, we didn't really know, right? We didn't have enough data to know how this variety typically performs because every new data point changed our estimate of the truth. So if we go to the next slide, we can see how this plays out as we get a much, much larger data set. So here, instead of just looking at the first 500 acres of data, we play this out for 300,000 acres of data, which is really an unprecedented data set size that has not traditionally been available when picking seed. But when you aggregate a lot of data from a lot of farms, you can get data sets that are this big. What we see here is completely different, right? On the past slide, we saw a small data set that gave us very little confidence in what the average yield actually was. What we see here is a large data set that provides us a lot of confidence in what the yield actually typically is, right? And once this yield stabilizes at about 200 bushels an acre, it stays incredibly stable even as we get 10, 20, 50, 100, 200,000 acres more data. And the fundamental reason that's causing this is the fact that small data sets are simply affected a lot by random error and noise, right? Random chance happens, right? One field does well or doesn't do well due to factors potentially unrelated to the product, right? Had really good weather, no pest problems, et cetera. If you get all the data from those fields first, you might just by chance think that the product is better than it is, or vice versa. When you have a lot of data, those concerns go away, right? The more data you have, data from 5, 10, 50, 100 farms, the less and less likely it becomes that you're just getting data from all the farms who had good luck, right? That becomes statistically very, very improbable the more data you have. So if we continue here, we can then talk about the second reason why aggregating data from a network is so critical, right? The first reason that we just talked about is this idea that more data washes out the error, the noise, the statistical artifacts that can really mess you up in a small data set, like a trial setting, right? Or like your own farm. The second reason, though, why aggregating data is so powerful is that it provides a way to run experiments much more efficiently and quickly than would be possible if you only had access to traditional data sets, right? And as all of you know, farming is very experimental, right? I'm sure many of you run trials on your own farm, trying new seeds, new fertilizers, new equipment, new practices. It's always been part of agriculture, right? And it's necessary because farming is so complicated with so many different factors that trying to optimize the combination of everything is very, very hard. The problem is that on your own farm, it's really slow to run trials, right? You can't try everything. It's not possible to run trials on everything that might matter just using the acres on one farm. So if we look at the next slide here, we can see if we aggregate data from a network, this can give us a head start, right? Collectively, across the FBN network, we've aggregated over 25,000 years of farming experience that all of our members have collectively contributed. And that means that if there's a new product you're considering, a new practice you're considering, a new piece of equipment, well, whatever it might be, if you're wondering how would this work on my farm, there's a pretty good chance that somebody else in the FBN network has already tried it, right? They may or may not have been intentionally running an experiment, but there's a pretty good likelihood that somebody has done that on their farm. And it's not going to be as good as doing it on your own farm, right? No data set is ever going to be a replacement for what works and what doesn't work on your ground. But if you can use data like this to get in the right ballpark to say, okay, well, here's generally some products that are working well in my area, you can run experiments on a much more, likely set of conditions to work than if you're having to make all those decisions completely on your own. One of the places where this really comes into play is when you're picking seed, right? Seed selection, as I'm sure everybody knows, is a critical decision, both for yield, for price, for traits. And making the right decision can be difficult because there's thousands of products on the market. And if we consider various data sources that you might use to help make that decision, one of them is looking at historical data from your farm. Say, okay, well, I planted these 20 varieties last year. Here's the 5 that did pretty well. Here's the 10 I might want to switch out. Here's, et cetera. You can learn from what worked on your farm. But that's good, but it only gets you coverage of maybe 10, 15, 20% of the products on the market, right? Because you can't try everything. University trials are interesting, right? They can get us coverage of more products, but they still don't cover everything. There's no way they economically can. And it's very difficult sometimes to know if data from trial settings is actually going to be applicable to real world farms. We can talk about that more during the panel, but it's difficult to translate research conditions into real world results, right? They're related, but they're not exactly the same. In contrast, the FBN data can give you coverage of almost every product on the market. And that's a product of aggregating data from the entire network, means that if there's a product on the market, there's a pretty good chance that we have the data. And picking seed with more complete data gives you a higher likelihood of picking the best product. So the goal of this is really to make the whole world a big plot trial, right? Rather than only having plot trial data from your farm, leveraging all the natural variation that's occurring across all of the farms in the country to help inform what might work on your farm. And we'll now just spend a couple minutes talking about a few of the FBN products, the FBN seed selection tools that we use to help bring some of these concepts to life, right? They're all based on the core idea of aggregating data from a network, both to provide statistical confidence and also to provide coverage of all the practices, but how does that actually play out in FBN? So our Seed Finder system is the core FBN agronomic product that brings all of these data science and big data ideas to life and makes it applicable for decision making on your farm. Seed Finder provides 3 different things that we'll talk about. The first, if we look at the next slide, is transparency on yield. So one way to think about Seed Finder is that it's basically a massive database of how seeds perform in the real world, right? A tool that can be used to help make the right decision for your farm based on the results from other farms in your region. And in aggregate, across our network, across multiple years of data, we have now 43 plus million acres of data that have been contributed. Covers over 5,000 seed products that are covered here. And for every product, you can see exactly how it yields. And of course, this data can be filtered to your soil type, to your region. You can look at certain years, look at it by crop rotation, by agronomic practice, to make sure that you're looking at data that is most relevant for your particular field. And really what that gives us is it gives us a completely new way to look at historical seed performance data, right? Rather than just trusting data from the seed company, rather than just looking at data from a trial that might be based on a very small sample size that's very noisy, we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres of real world data from actual farms to help make the yield numbers really, really meaningful for your farm. If we look at the next slide, another key part of this is pricing data, right? As I'm sure everybody knows, seed pricing is an area that historically has been completely lacking in transparency, right? One of the consistent complaints that we heard from farmers when we started FBN was frustration over how the industry typically prices seed, which is by not publishing list prices and instead having seed prices be a negotiation between a dealer and a farmer. What that lack of transparency results in is it results in different growers paying very, very different prices for the exact same products, right? Different farms don't pay the same price for the same thing. And farmers that we talked to generally felt that that was unfair, right? And didn't like the idea that they might be paying 20, 30, 40, 50%, 100% more than their neighbor for the exact same product. So our solution to this is very simple. We aggregate invoices from our members. It's a very easy way to get value out of FBN. Just upload an invoice, we aggregate all the data, publish back price distribution so that growers can see if they're considering a certain product, what a typical price is in their region, and make sure that they purchase a product that is priced appropriately and fairly given what other farmers are paying. And the last thing we do is looking at what we call seed relabeling data. So this is something that I think people have known about for a long time, right? The seed industry is very commonly selling genetics under multiple different names, right? The exact same genetics, exact same variety is routinely sold under 5, 10, 15, 20 different names that's not made transparent to the customer, right? Now legally, for companies operating in many states and in most jurisdictions, the name of the variety actually has to be pasted on the label. So what we did is we aggregated labels from tens of thousands of farms now, over 25,000 labels contributed, and we aggregated all that data together to build a database where we can match up the variety name on the label to the brand name and build a database of those connections. And what we found is that almost every company, not everyone, but the vast majority of seed companies are selling products that are available from other companies. And with this data, we're able to make that transparent. And if we look at the next slide, what we can then do is we can also analyze the difference in prices that we sometimes see between different companies selling the same product. And what we see is very large differences across the ag industry. The prices paid for the exact same genetics can differ quite a bit depending on what company's bag you're buying that product from. It can also lead to issues of genetic diversity, right? We've had a lot of members submit seed labels only to realize that they bought the same variety under 3 different brand names, right? Not knowing that it was the same product. We don't think that's good for farmers, right? We think that as a customer, you deserve to know what are the other products that we might be able to buy that are the same genetics. So with this data, we're able to make that very transparent. And you're not always going to want to plant the cheapest product, right? There's reasons where a higher priced product may make sense. Maybe it has better service, better guarantees, whatever it might be. That's completely fine. However, it's fair, you need to know which ones are the same to make sure you're planting the one that makes the most sense. So that's a quick summary of some of the seed selection tools that are popular among FBN members. And now thinking a little more, a little less FBN specific, but a little more about seed selection in general, I want to introduce Dan here, who leads our seed R&D team and has a long distinguished career in the ag industry with a variety of companies. And he's going to talk a little bit more about how to think about seed selection, not just in terms of yield, but also in terms of pricing and what that means for picking the right seed for your farm. So I'll turn it over to Dan and continue.
Thanks, Matt. Excuse me. As Matt said, I've been in this industry working with breeders pretty much all my career, which is more than 35 years now. And I got a confession to make when I start this topic, which is I love looking at yields. It's addictive to look at yield. But what I'm going to talk about here is one of the insights that's come from a lot of the data that we've collected that Matt was talking about. And that is, as I kind of have learned to share with farmers here, if all you're looking at is yield, you're a manufacturing company, right? If a manufacturing company only counts how many widgets they manufacture, that's not going to be a very good way to manage the finances of your company. You need to be looking at, are you making money on that yield? What's the net return that you're getting? So I've been educated by FBN now. I've been here for 2 months. And to really understand that this is what we're driving. So Matt talked about part of our mission, really the core of our mission, is to make our members more profitable. So we drive this looking at the net revenue. And our net revenue definition is pretty straightforward. Yield is a critical part. Commodity price, which is the part which you have some control over depending upon how you market your crop. But take into consideration the seed cost. Now, having been in this industry all my career, as I said, more than 35 years, I, as you have seen seed prices do some pretty crazy things, particularly corn seed. And what we see is, in a lot of cases, those higher seed prices just simply aren't justified. So let's look at a couple of insights that have come out of that data. Here's an example that a lot of corn farmers in the U.S. will have experienced. A lot of people have grown Pioneer 1197. And what we're comparing here is 1197 Acre Max Extra to the conventional. And indeed, the Acre Max version, 5 bushel yield advantage. And if you stop at that point, you're looking at yield, you'd say that's the one I want, 5 bushel yield advantage. But that seed's costing you almost $50 an acre, more than $50 an acre, more cost on the seed. So when you take that into consideration, you can see that it was actually the conventional hybrid that made the best return. Now, this isn't one farm. This is our database on 1197, which, Matt, is hundreds of thousands of acres, because this is the most widely grown hybrid in the United States, right? So this is hundreds of thousands of acres. On average, hundreds of thousands of acres, the farmers who grew the conventional made more money than the farmers who grew the traded version. Now, I've been in this a long time. I know that averages oversimplify, and on your farm, you're going to need to make the right decision. But it also means, since this was the average, probably half the people are making even better return by growing the conventional than what this says here. So there's a really fundamental question here, which I think we all need to face these days, which is, am I getting my money's worth on traits? This industry's really pushed traits hard and made it an expectation that you got to have. But I think what happens is over time the environment changes. The growing environment changes. We've clearly seen that since traits have been introduced. Glyphosate tolerance is not the complete answer that it used to be, right? There's glyphosate tolerant weeds out there. So glyphosate tolerance still has value, but not as much value as it did when it was introduced. Corn borer tolerance. I remember before the days of corn borer, that used to be one of the main things breeders rated hybrids on, was how well they could hold together given all the corn borer. It's hard to find corn borer problems now. So the value of that trait's still there, but it's less. So what I'm trying to say is the values of these traits have come down, but you know what's happened to the price? So over those years, the seed companies keep charging more and more and more. So the balance has gotten out. You're paying too much for some of these traits. We're seeing overall in our entire database, all traded corn, all conventional corn, over several years, millions of acres, an average 1 bushel per acre yield advantage on the traded corn. So it's $119 a bag average difference in cost. Now, I'm not standing up here to tell you quick growing traits. What I'm telling you is look at what you need in your farm and what's the best solution. We offer a lot of conventional products at a really good price point. We also offer traded products because sometimes that's the right answer. But what we're really driving is think about your net income and not just yield. With that provocative position, I'm going to ask Zach to open a Q&A session for us. We want to hear what you're thinking and see if we can answer some questions for you. But one of those questions that we particularly want to focus on is that provocative topic that we just were doing.
All right, so we're going to open it up to questions. If anybody's got any questions, hopefully some of you have some. I won't answer them, but these guys will be listening, and they will be the experts that will answer them. So who's got something here? I found that really interesting, Dan, where that last thing you said there about, you said in all of your data out there, it actually shows non-traded corn having a 1 bushel advantage?
No, 1 bushel advantage for the traded.
1 bushel advantage for the traded, okay,
And
got it.
$119 a bag more cost.
$119 a bag, average cost more. Wow.
Yeah.
We got one in the back there.
Does any of your data set have any information about the extra stuff that has to be put that's non-traded to make that product or not?
Yeah, we definitely, so in addition to tracking yield and variety data, we also track input use data. So by getting data from sprayers and then getting all the data on chemical invoices, we also can track the price per acre, the cost per acre to grow conventional. And I guess it's a mixed bag. Matt and Dan, you should add your thoughts here too. But I guess we've certainly have some farms who do have to make an additional chemical application to grow conventional successfully, and that can introduce some extra cost. In general, on average, it still hasn't been enough to make up for the price of the trait, but there's certainly exceptions where that might be different. And I think for growers managing fields in certain ways, that there's been little to no additional cost. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, you're getting right to it, and that's what I was trying to say about, you got to look not only on your farm, but field by field. If you have a field without any glyphosate-resistant weeds, and you still have a lot of corn borer issue in the area, maybe a GT, BT hybrid will pay for itself. But there's an awful lot of fields where glyphosate alone isn't going to be your herbicide solution, so you're going to have to make extra applications on your glyphosate-tolerant corn. And there's a lot of fields where, frankly, you don't need a corn borer trait. So that's what we're saying is, yeah, in our data, we can certainly break it down into the full cost of managing that crop, case by case. But we're really trying to just bring awareness to you that make sure you're looking at every field and what does each field need, because too many cases where the traits are costing you more than what they're delivering.
I think the real value, to answer your question, I think comes from the network. All the members submitting their information helps us understand that formula and figure out the answer to your question, because it's everything from planting through harvest. It isn't just about planting record and harvest data. It's everything in between as well to help us make an inference like this with the data. So it's important, if you're a member, your data contributes to this. And this model doesn't get better if we don't have your data. And so that's something I think is a key part. Zach, you know this as well as anybody, that your data drives this whole machine, and that's the big deal here.
That's a good question. I know personally, as a farmer myself, we hadn't grown any conventional corn or soybeans in probably close to 2 decades on our farm. And last year in 2019, we did grow some conventional corn and soy. It was all F2F stuff, but it was a learning curve for us as far as what are we going to do now, particularly when it came to weed control. And for us, I mean, where we're at with our chemistry on our farm, you know, Roundup still works to take care of a lot of the grasses. It's a good, cheap grass killer. But really, in our experience, and we run tillage, so that helps too. I know everybody's different. Everybody's in different conditions and manages a little differently. But essentially, all we did was cut the Roundup from the mix. I mean, we were still mixing the same stuff in the tank, and we cut the Roundup and maybe tossed in 1 or 2 other things to help control some grass a little bit. And for us, it really wasn't an issue. Our plan, I mean, we've got the seed ordered, is to plant more conventional acres this year. And most of that's driven by seed cost. And the fact that we did find a couple variety of beans and a hybrid of corn that did really well, so. Next question.
So you were just showing 1197 on there, conventional compared to traded. Have you ran the test over everything you have that's been traded compared to conventional? Did it come out about the same spread, or was there? Do you understand what I'm trying to ask there?
You're saying from hybrid to hybrid?
Yeah, I didn't know if you just put in there all traded corn yield compared to all conventional corn. I was just wondering if the bushels came out of just 1 bushel difference.
Yeah,
again.
that's actually what that second example was, all traded corn versus all conventional corn. Yeah.
But
bushel.
was the one example on the 1157, was that
The
just for 1157 though?
Yeah, 1197 was just 1197. In that case, all of our data said there was a 5 bushel advantage to the traded. But then the second example, all traded corn versus all conventional corn, and a 1 bushel difference.
1 bushel difference.
Yeah.
So do you have data like that on
Mm-hmm.
lots of different hybrids? I mean, if I want to look up DeKalb 4620 is a popular hybrid in my area. Can I go look that up and compare
Well-
the 4620 Smart Stack to, I think it's 4618 now, which would be,
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's only some where you can do because DeKalb.
yeah, because they're not going to release it in, yeah.
But, yeah, but yes, when they do have a conventional, yes.
Okay.
As a member, you can easily do that on the system.
Yeah, and if you knew that 4618 is the conventional version of 4620, you can go look that up in Seed Finder.
Sure.
And see how the yields and prices compare.
Okay.
Yep.
Next question. Yeah.
So that slide that you had up there, thank you. The slide that you had up there where you were showing the 5 products, 1151, 1197, 53, 56, those were all either in their day or still currently #1 products for those companies being sold. So we were seeing 100,000, 200,000 plus acres. Where do you put the confidence level when you're in the system and you pull up a product that only has 3,000 acres? I mean, should we take that data at the same level that we take the data that we just saw there? Or do you kind of say a minimum number of acres before you want to probably make those types of decisions?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Obviously, the more the better. The more you have, the more validity that there'll be regardless. But we do have some minimums in place, so we'll never show any data till we have data from at least 10 different farms to make sure that there's a base level both of anonymity and also of accuracy, right? If we have data from 1 or 2 farms on a product, we don't show it. One, because we don't think that that's that useful, but even more importantly, it's not anonymous enough, and it's important that the FBN data set always stays completely anonymous and never reveals anyone's individual yield. But yeah, it's a really good point. If you have 3,000 acres of data, I certainly don't trust that as much as something that has 100,000 or 500,000. I still would trust 3,000 more than, just a research trial that might have 1/10 of an acre, right? So I think it's more is always better. But yeah, we're always very, very careful to show the amount of acres that's underlying a variety recommendation. We want to be transparent about that so that you can take that into consideration. And if you see something's only based on 1,500 acres, like might still be interesting, but yeah, it's certainly going to be directionally less useful than the really big data sets. So yeah, it's a really good point.
3,000 acres is still a lot better than the coffee shop banter that you hear. Because I found in my own experience that the neighbor sitting at the bar at midnight doesn't always tell the whole truth. What else? Yeah.
I got it.
A standard membership,
One-year,
somebody's got it.
one-year membership at the show today is the $300 investment. 3-year membership, $650, and a 5-year, $1,250. Correct?
And that's,
There is all $50.
and
Sorry.
that's irrespective of the size of the farm.
Exactly.
It does not matter the size of the farm, yeah.
Yeah, and the value in the membership is well beyond what's here. This, from a data standpoint, all great stuff. There are other things we'll talk about here in a few minutes from our seed brand, also our chemical offer, financing offer, health insurance, crop insurance. But as a member, our goal is to take care of the inputs for your farm and help you get better on the cost side.
Yeah, if you're using the data and you find one thing in the data, it doesn't take long to make up for that $350 one-year membership at the show here, I guess in my opinion. Yep.
How are you getting the products when you find one that's cheaper somewhere else? Are you shipping them out, or how do we get those?
Are you asking me where the products came from? Yeah, we do have our own proprietary genetics. We also work with a network of independent plant breeders. There's quite a number of corn breeders in the U.S., small companies and some independent breeders. So we've got quite a diversity of germplasm. And we have trialing network, nurseries, et cetera. So the products that you're seeing, our conventional products in particular, are proprietary products developed within our own program.
Are you asking logistically how you get a hold of those products?
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. You're asking where they came from or how they get to you? Those are kind of the two questions.
So as a member, we have account people in the country as well, but you can also get them through our store, or you can call our office, or you can stop down at the booth. We'll get you set up with people that are near you for distribution. We have a chemical hub set up all over the Midwest as well, and also a seed transfer that works through the chemical hubs to get seed to your farm too.
So last year when ours came, the trucker brought it right to our yard. But now that did cost us, there was a shipping cost with that. This year they've set up, is it like 100 hubs or quite a few hubs?
Yep.
With members, farmer members around the nation. So we've got one, a member about 40 miles west of us. So we can get everything sent to his shop, to his place at no shipping cost. And then we just go pick it up at his place. So that's the way we're gonna do it with our chemical and seed this year. Next question. Got one over here?
There's a wide range in farmers' capabilities when it comes to data quality. Beyond, law of large numbers, how do you manage that when you're making these cross hybrid calculations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So the question is basically around data accuracy, right? And the more the getting data from a lot of farms when not every sensor is calibrated, what are the implications for data accuracy? So I think first of all, the first thing we try to do is always get calibrated sensor data whenever possible. So from a lot of our farms, we're collecting scale tickets and crop insurance, FSA reports, things like that, where we have a calibrated, validated yield so we can correct sensor errors when they occur. That's the first step. The second is, like you said, the more data you get, the less likely it is that those errors matter, right? If you have data from 5 farms, yeah, if 3 of those are miscalibrated, you're in trouble, right? That's a really big problem. If you have data from 1,000 farms, the likelihood that all of the sensors were calibrated too high for one product and too low for another product, therefore making the first product look better than it is, becomes really low, right? The more data you have, there's going to be some sensors that are calibrated too high, others that are calibrated too low, and in aggregate, those tend to cancel out. That's one of the powerful reasons to look at network data. But for sure, it's better to start off with calibrated data in the first place, which is why we do everything in our power to get weight scale tickets and validated calibration records, so we're sure we're looking at the right thing. And there's a lot of common sense data cleaning that we do as well, right? If we see every other farmer in this area had a yield of 150 to 160, then we get some other yield in that says 230, right? Like we can do a lot of contextual data cleaning that says, given what else we're seeing from the network in this area, this yield doesn't make sense, and then go back and make sure that gets addressed.
Is that a human process then? I mean, does somebody like you take a look at that and say, well, this is way out of line? So I mean, you can kick that out.
Yeah, there's a little bit of both, right? We have a bunch of automated checks to detect things that are clearly wrong, but a human does look at every data set we get as well, so it's not fully automated. We'd probably like to automate more of it, but at least for now, having a human judgment look at every data set and make sure it looks reasonable is a good safety mechanism to make sure that we're not getting bad data polluting any of the networked insights.
When you do, like, say, yield data, we saw some of those slides there that showed the yield data and the different data points. Are you kicking out some of the tops and bottoms there, taking more of an Olympic average?
Yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, so the ones that are totally out of whack given their area definitely gets cut out.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah.
On that same topic, is there a way to differentiate dry land versus irrigated acres? Because if you're kicking all of those irrigated acres out, I'm going to want to see that in some cases.
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, all of our seed data can be filtered by irrigated or non-irrigated. So we have that data for most of our farms. We even do things like looking at satellite imagery to pick out center pivots to help get a better idea of which fields are irrigated. So yeah, it's a great question, and all of the seed data and benchmarking can be restricted to irrigated or dry land in the relevant areas.
There's got to be another one. Nothing, Sally? You got one? Not today. Okay. Then I think we're going to bring up Matt Foley here. Yep. Talk about genetics a little bit more and some of the results from the 2019 varieties that were out there.
Very good. Thank you, Zach. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the genetics network that we have inside of FBN. One thing that our members can take advantage of, but I think the biggest thing, your takeaway today, is to look at the whole scope of things from a return on investment standpoint. And that's really what our challenge will be with the genetics network. So I'm going to ask you to listen to 5 slides. I'm going to walk you through that, and then I'm going to pay you to stay here. Okay? Have you ever been paid to stay in a talk today? I don't think anybody's paid you. Guys, I'm telling you, don't leave. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the F2F Genetics Network. If you look at your traditional seed process today, there's a lot of handoffs to get seed to your farm, to your question, right? There's a lot of things that your seed can go through. We tend to narrow that gap up. Our goal is to cut out the cost mechanisms of the seed model and to get things to your farm faster and get them in the network so that your input costs are lower. So go ahead and advance that. So if we take a look at this model, when we operate F2F Genetics, our goal is to get you closer to the breeder and get out all the steps that are in the middle. So we have a breeder's network that we've built. So just like we have a members network on one side of the equation, we have a breeder's network on the other side that works directly with us. And you can probably move that forward one more time. A breeder's network that works directly for us that is scattered all over the U.S. and Canada to develop products that fit into our network. So that's one portion of how we're driving our products forward and sourcing them. In addition to that, the foundation for our system, about 60% of what we do comes through our R&D sites. There's 5 breeders there on staff that do the corn development process as well. But this is about numbers for us. We have a big network on one side, the demands that they have for all of our members, and on the other side we have a flood of genetics coming that can help fill our lineup. So you're going to see us focused on, initially you'll see us on some conventional products. Our conventionals, the next step we will take in conventionals is integrating off-patent traits. So you'll see the addition of the glyphosate trait, BT trait into some of our products very quickly. So that gets us to the advanced breeding, which is in our future. We have a few things coming back from winter now that'll get us into the trait business pretty quickly. This has all happened in the last 18 to 24 months to get this many people involved to drive new products to build a lineup that'll fit our members. So this is all built around return on investment. If we can take out all of the middle people in this step and we can take out all the royalties that happen from a trait standpoint, we can bring you a product at less cost to your farm that gets you a performance level that you need to get a better ROI. So this is from our genetics data this past year. And I'll tell you one thing about transparency and data. If you're a member and you get to work with a tool online, you're going to see all the data, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. That comes from our members. And so what we're seeing here that all the data collected across all the farms, we had 72% of the time, we had a win rate with the F2F products. 72% of the time. And this is your submitted data from the members in the system. And what that translates to is a $27 ROI that's better than the competition. Okay? So at $27, there's a lot of things you can do. If you got 100 acres, how many dollars is that? $2,700. It's a big deal. And it adds up pretty quickly. So it's the power of the data to get to ROI. I think a lot of people can talk about yield. They can talk about the bushels at the coffee shop, but it's really, you got to think about the other side of the equation. That's the system we're up against today, is to understand the inputs. So at $27, this comes from grower data, just like they've talked about here as well. That's big money, just to get everybody to think a little bit harder about the front side of the equation when they're putting together their inputs for the year. Okay. All right, I'm going to introduce this, and we're going to bring Zach up. On your way out the door today, we do a lot of things for our members, and today we're even going to print a little money for you. Okay. They're going to hand you a $27 gift certificate, I believe, a $27 bill. Okay, we've made our own money here. All right. You're going to catch that on the way out the door. And what we're asking you to do is stop by our booth, if you haven't already. Stop in and see what we're all about. Even if you're a member, stop by, because I'm sure there's something added that you have not seen. It'd be a good opportunity for you to learn a little bit more and take advantage of a few more things within our network. So, thank you. Zach, you're up.
All right, as he was saying, make sure you grab your $27 bill on the way out the door and stop by booth 481 and check out what the company's all about and spend that $27, because you don't want to go home with that. There's also there's a happy hour going on at the booth right now, and then that's going to go.
It's right there on the
It's
screen.
not at the
Yep.
booth.
It's in 214A.
Oh, it's in 214A.
Yep.
Okay, happy hour in 214A, and I understand there's free beer, so you get $27 and free beer. And so,
Just doesn't get any better.
yeah, it doesn't get any better, yeah. What else? Are we missing anything here, or? I think we're good. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you being here and checking it out, so hopefully we'll see you at the booth and at happy hour.